Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. In this hour, we get to understand the connection between agribusiness and environmental sustainability. And to help us along with this conversation in studio, Chris Flowers, who is the Managing Director, Kakuzi PLC, and in the other studio, also joined by a gentleman that is Lucas Wainaina, who is a smallholder farmer. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining in on this one. And I think at this point, it is important to understand Kakuzi's core business. Which is it?
Thanks, Gladys. Our core business is a number of different crops: avocados, macadamias, forestry, livestock, the superfood crops. You know, crops that people believe are beneficial for their health. And really, we're serving an international market and a regional market as well. And we've just started a new venture into blueberries, which is very embryonic, but we hope that if it is successful, it will also give another core crop to our portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And you have been in the country for how long doing this business?
Kakuzi's journey is decades old. We've just undertaken our 93rd annual general meeting. And I think we were one of the first listed agricultural entities in the country, and I'm proud of the fact that we've got 1,300 shareholders. Mm-hmm. We are an amalgamation of different properties which really began their days in sisal and then ventured into tea and coffee, and then from tea and coffee into where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned some of the crops that you are into. Let's hear from the farmer. And what crops do you grow?
I grow hash of avocados. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it for the last 10 years.
Okay. And how is business?
Business is okay. Mm-hmm. Since market is there with Kakuzi. So, in fact, the business has been very good with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yes.
Now Wakenya wanapenda avocado zao sana. So, hiyo market pia iko hapa ama ni ile tu ya export?
Market mimi hasa udeal na hiyo export. Sababu hii ya kuuza hapa reja hainipendezi sana. Okay. So, wakati napeleka Kakuzi, I think nakuwa nikifanya na export.
Na unasema ile biashara ya Kenya ni reja. Kwani Wakenya wali sana ama?
Well, unajua inategemea. Sasa hiyo ni ya kuuza hivi kidogo. And wakati nimepeleka Kakuzi na ni kitu ambayo napeleka tunamaliza na mara moja, napeleka kitu ambacho ni ya big kitu mingi. Yeah, so hii ya kupeleka sokoni, alafu tunauza moja. Wanakula ndio, wanakuja kutafuta vile, lakini I prefer selling to a company that will give me something reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. And why avocados? Because they have all these other crops that they also work with.
Well, I first started with the beans and maize. Then I saw it was going well. So I turned it to mangoes. The various types of mangoes. I also saw that they were not doing well. So I turned to avocados. From the time I turned to avocados, that is about 10 years ago, I've been seeing improvement. It has changed. I've seen good results.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the, marupurupu.
Marupurupu, yes. Marupurupu, yes.
All right. And speaking of which, Chris, you mentioned the crops that you are involved in: avocados, blueberries, macadamia. I mean, why these particular crops?
We started avocados in about 1996, and at that point, it was going to be a 200-hectare commercial trial. Mm-hmm. And back in 1996, I don't think anyone could have really envisaged where the global demand was going to go for avocados. So we're now currently at about 900 hectares, and we'll finish at about 1,200 hectares by the time we've completed. So over the years, Kakuzi's undertaken a myriad of different agricultural trials and got to a point whereby we found that things grow. We can grow them with confidence. We can link in environmental sustainability into the growing of those crops, which is hugely important to us. And also we can play a role in economic empowerment of smallholder farmers, which we fundamentally believe is the right way of interacting with smallholder farmers, is using those crops to get them access to the international markets that we also play in. And I think we've just heard, I mean, the price of avocados in country is not as good as it is externally, but that will change in time, and I think it would be wrong for us to also ignore the regional markets. I mean, last year we didn't export a single blueberry. It was all sold in Nairobi.
Oh, impressive.
And I think that's really speaking to the demand for quality, healthy, convenient foods.
And speaking about markets, what is the demand globally, and what percentage does Kakuzi, Kenya meet in as far as avocados are concerned?
It's a very interesting question, because the demand globally is massive. Just to put some numbers around that. A person in Mexico will consume about 7 kilos of avocados a year. America is about 3.5 to 4. Europe, it's about 1 kilo. And China, with 1.3 billion people, is a tiny amount of avocados. So you can see what the demand is for avocados. So as a rough estimate, about 4.5 million metric tons of avocados are produced each year. And Kenya, of all of its varieties, is about 70,000 tons. So even though we're in the top 10 exporters, we're a tiny producer, but a really important producer. And the key to that, and the key to getting more people eating Kenyan fruit, is producing a high quality fruit. I mean, if you can give a consumer a really good experience in eating your product, they're going to come back again for more. And we'll be able to then compete with our South African growers and our Peruvian growers. And so, you know, building that demand for Kenyan fruit is equally as important as Kakuzi saying that it wants to grow its marketplace. It's much easier if we're selling a country rather than a company. Everybody wants Kenyan fruit. As a figure, we probably produce about 20% of the Hass production of Kenya.
Kenyan avocados?
Of the Hass, because there's two varieties really. There's a green skin variety and a Hass variety. And Kenya produces about 50-50 of both, and we produce about 20% of the Hass production.
All right, that's a huge market. And I'm curious to know, Lucas, you said that the avocado business is very lucrative. How did you first of all get into, connected to Kakuzi?
Well, it's a long story, because Kakuzi are the ones who made me know about avocados. In fact, then Kakuzi approached us and told us to form a group. We formed a group that I was the chairman. And then from there, they sold us the seedlings. They followed us through this field officers, showed us how to plant the seedlings, and from there we continued with them. That was about early 2012. From there, after 3 years, then I started harvesting the first trees. And then from there, 3 years to date, I've been adding my trees, which now I have seen have improved very much.
Okay. And quick one, now that you're saying there is a process, you plant the seedling, how does that process look like? Is it daunting? Does it take a lot of time before, between planting and harvesting?
That is, you're asking what?
Yeah, how long? Inachukua muda mrefu kutoka upande na uharvest?
It takes from planting to harvesting.
Yes.
It takes about 3 years. 3 years. If you plant your seedling well, and if you care for it well, give manure and so after 3 years you start getting fruits.
So approximately how much fruit do you harvest at a time?
Well, I harvest about, at a time,
Yes.
I harvest about 3,000 fruits at a time. And that one goes in interval of about 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, I'll again harvest the same quantity.
Oh.
But it goes up to about 3 times, and then these people are field officers. There's a time they come and tell us to do away with everything and send to them. So that one will take is about August of every year.
Okay.
So we free the trees, leave them to at least have something else to prepare the trees for the harvest in the next season.
Okay. All right. So, Chris, first of all, how do you get in touch or identify the smallholder farmers you'd like to work with? And what does it entail, perhaps, in training of the same?
Yeah. I mean, that's the key, actually, is training. I mean, this whole story of how you grow an avocado, you've got to actually bolt onto that. Who are you going to sell the avocado to? So we have an extension service team. We do a lot of written material, we do a lot of farm visits, we do a lot of Anoro radio, we do a lot of pamphlets, and then pre-COVID days we were doing farmer training days at the farm itself and open days as well. And that interaction, building knowledge, is what this is all about. I mean, there's a lot of people who are saying plant avocados, but who is saying, and to sell an avocado at a good price, this is what you have to do. And that speaks to the fertilizers that you put in, the timing of those fertilizers, when you harvest the fruit, your pest and disease controls. All of that is not daunting, but it's a process that you have to understand.
And how do you identify the smallholder farmers to work with?
We're really fortunate that actually we have people coming to us. We have 3,000 registered farmers, and just over actually, and they're coming all the time. And the principle that we take is that you don't have to sell us your fruit to get our extension services. We have a duty to impart our knowledge to others, and if that improves the quality of Kenyan avocados, then that's a good thing for everybody, and Kukuzi benefits from that indirectly as well.
Okay, now you have over 25 years of experience working in the agricultural sector in the region. How does Kenya fare compared to its peers when it comes to such crops?
I mean, Kenya's probably, well, by far the largest producer in East Africa, and South Africa, which is its closest competitor, probably produces more than Kenya, but exports a little bit less because it's got quite a big domestic market as well. So we're probably on a par with exporting the same amount as South Africa. Probably, it depends on the year, but South Africa is a much bigger producer.
Okay. Now, we cannot ignore the fact that the pandemic impacted us, and there's a time the boundaries were closed and there wasn't much business happening. Lucas, were you affected by the pandemic?
A pandemic?
Was biashara iliafektiwa na COVID-19 pandemic kwa sababu, you know, importation na exportation pia zili disruptiwa?
Kwa biashara kwa kweli sisi haikuwa tu affect sana. The thing is, sisi tukitoa matunda yetu tunapeleka mahali ambayo kuna ni karibu na mahali ambayo inashughulikiwa. So tuliendelea na mavuno sawa sawa. The only thing ni sisi huwa na mkutano every end of the year na Kakuzi, na wanatu update vile mambo iko. For the last, since COVID came, hatukupata kuendelea na hiyo mikutano. So that is a workshop ambao hutufanyia kwa siku moja. The only thing that I've seen changed is that one, that we were not, the Kakuzi didn't call at this time because of COVID. For the last December.
Okay.
Otherwise, things have been going on well.
Okay, and Chris, what has been the impact of the pandemic on business?
Well, I mean, when we really started to look at this in March last year, we had some real concerns, not just about the export market and what that would look like, but what the ability to logistics in country and employee welfare. And so we very quickly decongested processing facilities, and we're fortunate because we are an agricultural operator, so the majority of our 3,000 workers are in fields. But the actual logistics side went very, very well, and I think we do have to thank and pay credit to the authorities, Kenya Ports Authority and the KRA actually pulled out every stop they could pull out to make sure that logistics ran as smoothly as they could. So we exported all of our fruit, albeit into a very difficult European market. The food retail sector was decimated. Every pub, restaurant, cafe was closed for months. So those eating experiences that people would normally have were removed. Now, with that said, we still had a lot of domestic consumption, and that really balanced out some of the loss from the food service sector. So for avocados, the price drop was more a function of worldwide volume rather than the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Macadamia's a bit of a different story. The food service sector had a big impact on the price of macadamias, and we're seeing that still filtering through into 2021. And if the Tokyo Olympics are cancelled, that will have a big impact on consumption of snack type products, which macadamias are quite an integral part of. So from the avocado side, it was okay. From the macadamia side, we're still feeling the impact of that.
And the blueberries, you said there was a lot of domestic consumption.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and is it a seasonal thing, or is this the first time you're seeing a lot more consumption of the same in the country?
It was the first time we were growing it last season, so we were pleasantly surprised by what the demand level was, and so, you know, for us that just taught us a real lesson that actually there's this latent demand that we need to satisfy before we send fruits outside. So it's quite an important learning experience.
And speaking of lessons, the pandemic has taught us all some lessons in as far as how business is done. What are some of the adjustments you've had to do going forward, considering that some of these things might happen again as long as we're still in the pandemic?
I think we had to really look at employee health, and we then recruited about 13 more public health officers, so we could do daily health scanning of our employees, and then to try and create shifts or working groups. So if there was a small case of COVID, we could isolate and treat that group, and the operations, if you like, were limited in terms of what the impact on it was limited. So the lesson is we have to carry on spending on employee health, because this is not going to go away.
Mm-hmm. And how about adjustment in terms of how you respond to the markets and the market shifts therein?
It is a very interesting question. I think for avocados, you can get that replacement of restaurants to domestic. People want to eat good food. They're not just going to eat an avocado in a restaurant. They're going to take it home and have it as a salad, or the desire to have healthier food when you do have a pandemic is also greater. Macadamias is a very interesting one because it's such an ingredient. It goes into cookies, it goes into ice creams, it goes into the stuff that you have when you are out. So the snack market, which you may have at home, is not as big as the snack market that you would have, or the ingredient market that you'd have when you are in a social setting. So we wait to see how that's going to materialize.
Okay, and what actually got you curious about the blueberries again?
It's the superfood view. I mean, diversity is so important to Kukuzi, and to have another superfood in the stable, which is a perennial, which has repeatability, so you can learn lessons on how to grow it, and that lesson helps you for another year. that was quite important for us. It fits in with our views of long-term agriculture.
Okay, we take a short break on Your World. When we come back, we hear more about how Kakuzi integrates the smallholder farmers and exactly how they ensure that they actually lend their hand in protecting the environment or sustaining the same. We'll be right back.
May and September intakes are ongoing. Apply now. SMS your details to the numbers on your screen. Eldoret Technical Training Institute. Growing reputation.
It's super cool to be a mass superhero, to get the spread of the virus to 0. Here's how to wear a mask. Clean your hands before putting on your mask. Make sure your mask is clean. Cover your mouth, nose, and chin with a clean mask. Then adjust the mask on your face, leaving no gaps on the sides. That's it. Now you're good to go. Yay! Wearing a mask helps protect you and others from spreading viruses. To get the spread of the virus to 0.
Napendeza? Umefanya vizuri kabisa. Asante sana baby.
Mbona ulinikisi?
Kusema kweli nilikuwa tunataka popa asikie vibando ache kunisumbua.
Ulikuwa unamtumia?
Tunaweza date.
Umefunga shughuli zako, ukaona haikutosha asubuhi, ukamu nipime tena, si ndio?
Siwache nikupeleke dina.
Sasa uko single Swaiba. Niwe uende ujivinjari. Uzi kaa hapa Richard akai nyumbani kununa.
Wow, thank you for your time. How juicy.
Juicy.
Ni swala ambalo limetatiza mafisi wengi. Huenda ikawa anayepiga simu anataka kukula fea, ama msupa amejipa kiro safi. Nduru za kuaminika zimetufikia ya kwamba
to get more mafisi, dial *811 *935#. Skiza na Nation.
Try Panadol Advance for relief from headaches, body aches, and fever. With Panadol's Optizorb formula, the tablet gently breaks down in the stomach, quickly absorbs, and starts providing pain relief in 15 minutes. For fast and effective pain relief that you can trust, try Panadol Advance.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. We are understanding agribusiness and the connection with environmental sustainability. Still with us, Chris Flowers, Managing Director at Kakuzi PLC, rather, and of course, Lucas Wainaina, smallholder farmer, with us. But before we get back to that conversation, gentlemen, let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines in your other world. And people in Athens head to an outdoor cinema with a view of the Acropolis as it reopens with a 75% capacity as to ensure social distancing. One of the spectators says, at last, back to normality, to a lovely cinema, and immediately we rushed to come and see a nice film to enjoy the surrounding next to the Acropolis. And one of the cinema staff said, at last we opened the doors to welcome the spectators so that they enjoy films under the Athenian sky. The measures include a 75% capacity without an intermission during the screening, and the canteen will be working throughout the screening. It is mandatory for the spectators to wear a face mask before, during, and while they exit the cinema. Mountaineer Kashnegi is fully prepared to take on the world's highest mountain after spending several weeks sleeping in a tent in his living room in New Jersey. As Nepal battles COVID-19, a growing number of climbers are using oxygen deprivation tents ahead of the expeditions to reduce exposure to the coronavirus by cutting down the length of their Himalayan adventure.
At home, I sleep in this tent for 8 to 10 hours every day to get adjusted to the higher altitude. And then I also have a mask that I can wear, and that reduces the oxygen supply. And then I can bike using that mask.
In order to kind of minimize the risk of being a long time in the mountain and also exposing people to COVID, I decided to do this speed ascent that basically involved pre-acclimatizing at home. So basically using this beautiful tent behind me to spend 2 months sleeping and working from inside while lowering the oxygen that I was breathing. At the very beginning especially, it was very hard to breathe and I would get faint. But as I was acclimatizing, now I'm completely good. I can do phone calls. I've done job interviews at 6,400 meters from my tent, and I've been hopefully fine.
Having the possibility to make an Everest expedition in 3 or 4 weeks opens an Everest ascent for people who don't have that amount of time normally. So yes, interest is definitely growing for this. And that limits the time of exposure on the mountain to mountain risks, avalanches, ice fall, altitude. You don't get that weak as you would when you stay for 8 or 9 weeks in high altitude. It also limits or cuts the time of exposure to the risk of a COVID infection.
Elsewhere, scientists at Thailand's Chulalongkorn University Veterinary Science School have been working with a team of labs and retrievers in recent months to train them to sniff out coronavirus cases.
They didn't identify the virus. They are not PCR machine. So what they detect is the volatile organic compounds that produced from our body by cell metabolism of the infected organ. We have volunteers who donate their sweat for the study, and those were confirmed by PCR already that they were infected. The doctor, the human doctor, delivered the samples to us and gave to the dogs. The dog has its own capability that never been shown up before, and it's amazing for us to know that their nose, their receptors in the nose, can help human patients to screen the pandemic disease like this.
Back to our conversation, even as we understand agribusiness and environmental sustainability. Lucas, I'd like to understand from you. Since you joined Kakuzi, as you said, this has been going to 10 years now. Maisha yamebadilika vipi?
How?
Yes?
You asking?
I'm asking, since you joined Kakuzi, how has life changed?
Well, life has changed. As I told you earlier, I was dealing with maize and beans, and then to mangoes. Now I changed it to avocados, which Kakuzi introduced to me. Since the time I started with Kakuzi and avocados, I've seen a great change. Because financially, I am now comfortable with what I'm getting, comparing with what I was getting with other crops, the crops I told you earlier. It's there's a change, and has improved much.
Okay, and in as far as the impact on the greater community, I mean, Kakuzi is very keen on impacting the community. How has that changed?
Well, according to the community, as I told you earlier also, when I joined Kakuzi, we were in a group. We joined Kakuzi as a group. As I told you, I was the chairman by then, a farming group. And with that group of ours, let me not talk of other people, with that group of ours, and especially the area I come from, Kakuzi has been very social to us. Very social to us. I remember even at the times we go to them and ask for help. They give us some bridges. There's the time when we go perhaps asking for their help. I remember sometimes when it is very dry, no rain, because we entirely depend on rainy water. There's no rain, there's no pipe water at our place. So when we need water for certain occasions, I remember like funerals, Kakuzi sometimes provides us with water. So the Kakuzi to us is, they're friendly to us. So,
okay, so clearly this relationship goes beyond business. You also ensure to empower the social day-to-day lives. Why and how do you ensure that you keep this going?
We have a very extensive corporate social responsibility program, and it really looks at education, it looks at health, it looks at sanitation, and it looks at water. I'm very proud of some of the things that we've been able to do with our schools specifically. I mean, we've been able to rehabilitate classrooms, we've been able to provide thousands upon thousands of school desks, we've been able to provide sanitation facilities and additional water facilities into schools. And that, on a daily basis, Kakuzi has something like 2,500 school children that attend schools on the Kakuzi property. And so it's a significant amount of education that happens within the farm itself. I mean, the other things that really we engage in are community roads as well. I mean, there is a big demand for people to move around, and there's a lot of the time the government roads are not in such a good state, so we come in and we either provide an additional road or we provide a repair to an existing road, and that's helped us enormously. During COVID times, of course, we've come in with additional support for ICU beds, for medical equipment, PPE for the county government as well, and we've worked very closely with the county government in delivering vaccinations to the local community and our own employees. I think as of yesterday, something like 450 vaccinations have been administered through our clinics, which we're pretty impressed by.
Okay, and back to business, how or which counties are you present in and why?
We are in Maranga and we have a tea estate in Nandi Hills. But the majority of our operations are in Maranga. And that's historically where the farming has been undertaken. We used to have a building in Nairobi, but that was sold many years ago so we could invest in the water resources of Kakuzi, and I think those sorts of decisions have really characterized who Kakuzi is. It's very long term, it's very agricultural. So yes, buildings in Nairobi look very lucrative, but as we move into climate change, having significant water resources in an agricultural setting is perhaps more advantageous to Kakuzi.
And we are talking about the amalgamation of agribusiness and definitely environmental sustainability. How do these two merge for you at Kakuzi?
Well, we're passionate about sustainability, and I think this is where the future is going to be. I mean, if you can combine doing work which takes carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it into your soil, and then at the same time you grow a crop which uses a minimum amount of external inputs, that has got to be good for climate change. And we've been working very closely with the Carbon Trust in the UK to really identify what our carbon hotspots are, and then we can then start to speak to those with interventions. And it's now all about additionality. What you've been doing before is fine, but you need to do something a lot more if we're going to have an impact on climate change. And I think that's the direction of travel that we're going in. And we're so well placed as Kenya to do this because we've got this fantastic graduate market. We've got ag tech, which is breaking new sort of boundaries all the time. And if we can get these technological young minds into agriculture and into ag tech, into sustainability and mitigating climate change, I really believe as a country we can be at the leading edge of modern agriculture.
All right. Is this what informs one of your other core businesses, which is agroforestry?
I mean, forestry is very much important to us in the sense that we are not producing wood just for being burnt. We're producing wood to replace other construction materials, whether that be concrete, whether it be metal, whether it be plastic. This is a sustainable piece of product that has captured carbon from the atmosphere and will be used for many generations to come, and substitutes things that are less environmentally sustainable. Yes, it's very important to us, that core crop.
And the world continues to experience huge climatic changes which are linked to the increased heat, you know, the droughts we're seeing, floods, insect outbreaks. We've seen Africa deal with the locust infestation. Has any of this affected your core business?
Climate change affects us all the time, and we are only going to see more and more impacts of climate change as we go through the years. And we have to make sure that we farm for the future, and it's no point just looking at this year. You've got to look at 5, 10, 15 years' time, and what are going to be the farming interventions that you are going to use to protect and grow a crop. And then how can you take that technology and make it scalable so everybody's got access to it.
And technology has been at the forefront, especially within the pandemic, but also in the agriculture sector.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've also adopted?
We really are quite excited by what can go on in technology at the moment. If you look at drones, you can put a drone in the air and it can identify the health of a tree, an individual tree and a whole line of them, whether it's got certain pests, and then you can then bring your interventions in. So instead of a blanket application of whatever it may be, you can really target to very small areas. And that's very, very important in terms of our sort of environmental sustainable journey.
All right. Now, Lucas, even as we bring this conversation to a close, you have been in farming for a long time, doing even better after joining in with Kakuzi. What's your words or words of advice to the young who believe farming ni kazi chafu?
To me?
Now, Lizaje, you've been in the farming sector for a long time, and you have literally, reaped the benefits and now more after meeting Kakuzi. What would you tell the young minds that say farming ni kazi chafu sana?
Not getting you well. Yeah, so You're asking of
I'm asking your wisdom to the young minds that say farming hawezi ingia sababu ni kazi chafu.
Well. To this young generation, these young people, I would encourage them to practice farming. I personally have been out of farming for quite a long time, and I just joined farming about 30. So my younger age, I used to be in other businesses. And since I joined farming, in my old age, I've seen a lot of improvement. Now what I would advise these young people is to start farming in the earlier age. And that will help them very, very well. Because farming is there to stay. Farming is growing. Because like now we are seeing of avocado, still the demand is too high to the world. And if somebody has a land and start practicing this farming at his earlier age, that it will, in fact, build his future very abundantly. So I would advise them to start practicing farming, and especially for such fruits which are they don't have much to do. You plant them, and then you feed them with whatever little you have, manure, and perhaps give the best treatment. Like avocado is very little to do with them. And they'll give you, in return, they give you something good. So young people, come to farming.
Okay, and how about those that are shying away saying it's a very capital-intensive venture?
They are?
How about those ones who say you need a lot of money to get into that space? Pesa za capital kuanzisha biashara ulitoa wapi?
Well, the only problem, and I think this is not to all of them, is having a land. Because there are some of those who have land and they don't make use of it. There are some who even have very much. I'd say starting farming like avocados is, you start with a very little. So you start with only about 10 trees. And in a near future, after 3 years, as I told you, they'll start giving you input. They give you something in return.
Okay.
So you continue planting little by little, depending on what size the land you have.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, clearly availability of land and capital getting into this business could be an impediment to others joining in on the same. How do you enable farmers?
I mean, land, is always going to be a problem for some areas, but there is a lot of land that's being converted out of traditional crops into avocados. And I think that the most important thing is you've got to get it right. You don't want to have people disappointed. So when they spend that hard-earned shilling on a plant or on putting a plant in the ground, you don't want people doing it in the wrong way, because then that money won't give you the return that Mzee has just spoken about. So education and knowledge is the key to this.
And perhaps the mentorship that comes with this space, because if for us or for you to tap into the young minds, they need some sort of mentorship and education, right?
Yes.
Is this something you're investing in?
Absolutely. I mean, we started off with our extension programs, and then we wanted to move into an avocado academy, and we began with these farmer field days. And then COVID came along and rather stopped that for us. But as soon as we're out of COVID, then we're going to be heavily looking at an avocado academy where people can come and look at the beginning to the end of how to grow avocados. And again, with technology, it can be backed up with SMSs, WhatsApp groups. We've got lots of things on YouTube in how to grow products as well.
And now finally, Kakuzi's core business is dependent on the food retail sector, which remained largely closed in foreign markets in 2020. How does 2021 look for you?
I think we We reacted as you would expect any responsible company to react, and we have put in place quite a significant raft of measures which the international retailers have taken on and said that is actually what we would expect for responsible companies to look at when faced with such allegations. And we are confident that they will continue to engage with us in the way they have been engaging with us right the way through this process. And this is a journey. You have to walk that journey, and I think every producer who's looking to export markets has to walk that journey.
All right, that is Chris Flowers, Managing Director, Kakuzi PLC, and Lucas Wainaina, who is a smallholder farmer, giving us more information about the integration of agribusiness and